I want to welcome you to Heroes Among Us, where we focus on the men and women who served our great country. Today, my guest here on Heroes is Congressman Brian Mast. Congressman?
Sir?
Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
For those in our audience who don't know your story, would you mind telling us about your experience as a soldier?
I don't mind at all. It was one of the greatest experiences of my life. It may go down as the greatest experience of my life. I was a soldier for a little bit over 12 years, U.S. Army. I spent most of my career as a bomb technician, or EOD, people call it. People always ask, oh, is that like the movie The Hurt Locker? And yeah, it's similar to the movie The Hurt Locker. That's a little bit more Hollywood, but it's like the movie The Hurt Locker. I was serving in Afghanistan in 2010. I was a part of a unit under Joint Special Operations Command, so I was in Special Operations and found one IED, or improvised explosive device, too many. I was in a spot that we only work under the cover of darkness. I was looking for a bomb as we were going to look for a target in a place that I pretty much knew there was a bomb. Found it by stepping on it. Remember everything about that. Remember it tumbling me through the air, remember the plume of dirt and dust in the air, remember my guys coming in to put tourniquets on me, remember them loading me up onto a stretcher, carrying me off the battlefield, loading me up onto a helicopter, and that's pretty much the last thing that I remember until I woke up about a week later in Walter Reed Army Medical Center, but remember it all.
I can only imagine the stress you would go through on a daily basis, probably. How did you deal with that type of stress?
I mean, I think it's a little bit different for everybody. I was a bomb technician, so every single time I was doing my job, it was a life and death situation. You know, we would joke about it as bomb technicians, but it was our motto. Our motto was initial success or total failure. And it was true. You either get it right or you get it wrong. There is no in between. My wife and I, we kind of, I don't think we'd laugh about it, but we're surprised about this. You know, being a bomb technician, her and I were very prepared for the idea that I might not come home. We didn't joke about it, but we were prepared. We talked about it, and because if something went wrong, we just assumed that I would die. We never played out the idea that I might come home differently, and I think that was surprising to us. I'm grateful to be here, though.
Training. How much training did you go through to be a bomb technician?
It was extensive. You know, when you want to be a bomb technician, it's an interesting job where you have to both be very academically capable, because you have to understand the physics of blast effects, you have to understand the chemistry of explosives, and you have to, there's a lot of book work to it. There's a great deal of academic work to it. The hundreds of thousands of pieces of munitions and ordnance that exist out there that are created by every country, from hand grenades to guided missiles to nuclear weapons, you name it. We have to be able to work on all of it. But you also have to be a person that has the ability to get underneath the hood of a car and turn a wrench, because when you're actually disarming a bomb, you're working on it, you're taking it apart, you're doing different things with it, and then beyond that, you got to have the guts. You got to have the guts to stand on top of something and say, it's going to be you or me. We're either going to get this right or we're going to get it wrong. And if we get it wrong, that's going to be it. And so there's a couple of things that play out there. Your school that you actually go to, your military school that you go to for it, it's about a year long of very intensive work. And then when I was trying to go into special operations, I probably went through another year of training in that, because it was a completely different set of skills. I had to take all those skills that I used before, that I might use robots or bomb suits or things like that, and I had to learn to do it all with just my hands. Because when you're in special operations and you're moving across the ground after targets in a very rapid way, you can't carry a 100-pound bomb suit on your back. You can't carry a 100-pound robot on top of your 30 pounds of body armor. I carried 30 pounds of explosives. You had a helmet that weighs 3, 4, 5 pounds, a rifle that weighs 8 pounds. I carried 8 to 10 magazines of 20 rounds apiece. I had a pistol. I had my magazines for that. Hand grenades. Water weighs 8.3 pounds a gallon. I mean, you're loaded down. So I had to learn to do the job in a way that I didn't have all the normal tools.
Sure. So as you were approached with different bombs, did you accumulate maybe sort of like schematics, so you could say this is bomb A, B, or C, and so you have a sort of a head start on what you're getting into, or?
There's a balance in that. So if you're talking about a piece of manufactured ordnance, something that came out of a factory somewhere, some Russian munition or Iranian munition or U.S. munition, there's a very set way to go about each one of those, and I had a set of publications that I would always have with me that would tell me this is how you disarm this one or that one. But the biggest killer that we face on our battlefields, on our modern battlefields, are IEDs, improvised explosive devices. Those aren't manufactured in a factory. This is something that is up to the creativity of some bomber. It's up to his imagination. And that's what bombing has become today. It's the imagination of the bomber. And the real cat and mouse game of it, it's not the power source that you use. You could use any kind of batteries. It's not the blasting cap that you use, that you get a larger bulk pile of explosives to go off with. It's not the pile of explosives. It's not whether you use PETN or TATP or some other kind of explosives. The creative part about it is, how does a bomber get somebody to set a device off without them knowing it? That's the cat and mouse of bombing. Do they get it to go off by a tripwire? Or is it a tripwire that if you walk through it, it goes off, or if you cut it, it goes off? Is it a pressure plate where you step on it, it goes off? Is it something that goes off because of altitude, or something that goes off because you move it, or something that goes off because of a timer, or 101 other reasons? That's the real cat and mouse to bombing, is how do you make a device go off without somebody knowing they're going to set it off?
So the IED then, is there at times a certain signature for a certain IED that you say, well, okay, this was probably made by so-and-so, or?
There is that. You know, there's time frames on the battlefield where we would see different threats because the enemy would progress. They would start out with some sort of improvised explosive device, and I can't get into the specifics of this because there are still people on the ground that are combating this threat, and we can't give the details away of how we defeat them, otherwise my friends would be in greater risk. But there's certainly a progression on the battlefield where, you know, historically speaking, there was a time that they were using passive infrared sensors, right? The motion detectors that people have on their houses. And they were using those to get our up-armored vehicles. The up-armored vehicles would drive past them, and that would make them go off. So eventually they came up with a piece of equipment that would go out in front of the vehicle that would set off that passive infrared sensor so that it would go off before the vehicle went through there. You know, that's an example of the cat and mouse that exists to it. That was from a number of years back, you know, going into Iraq. But yeah, there's a constant progression to it. They're watching us and we're watching them, and we're reacting to one another.
You know, I can only imagine, once again, the amount of tension and stress that you accumulate. I know you sort of get used to it daily, but I can't conceive how you get used to that type of stress. You know,
I think we're all wired a little bit differently, and we got to find, you know, hopefully they do a very good job in weeding us out for the specific jobs that we do. I went through quite a good deal of psychological testing to do my job and suitability testing to do my job, and I think they try to get the right people for that. We would go through very specific training where we would do everything we can to put ourselves in the most stressful situations and then bring our heart rate down to a level that might even be, you know, below a normal resting heart rate. You know, that was the goal, because you don't want to walk up onto a bomb with your heart rate going, you know, 120 beats per minute, and you're sitting there fumbling trying to disarm it. No, you want your heart rate down at, you know, 45, 50 beats, you know, a minute, something that was resting for me, and then be doing your job. But like I said, that can be difficult, but that's the goal. So you see the old joke, I don't know, there's different memes that go out there on Facebook and things like that. So I don't know if you ever saw the one where you got a bomb technician there and you see him fiddling with a bomb. He's getting ready to, and there's one of his buddies behind him with the paper bag getting ready to pop it. You know, that's the...
Funny, I guess.
That's the joke, you know, for us.
You know, well, thank you for your bravery and your... you know, tackling these jobs for us in this country. Your recovery, so tell us a little bit about your recovery and what that process was about.
The recovery process for me was one of the most amazing times of my life, and without question, probably the most important time of my life. You know, we all get different lessons out there at different times, but to be able to put them into action and see them play out, that's important. You know, I am a firm believer that it's not the challenges that we face that really matter in life, because struggle doesn't spare any one of us. You know, we just had a hurricane. That's a perfect example. Every single one of us faces struggle.
True.
What matters is, what do we do when we face that struggle? And I think for so many of us, that becomes the moment that we really make ourselves the strongest version of ourselves that we've ever been in our lives. And that's what injury did for me. You know, it was a difficult time to go through, and I had to harness everything that I had inside of me to go out there and to recover and do physical therapy all day long, every single day. I had to go through a lot of pain, a lot of, as they say, blood, sweat, and tears in order to get back to a normal routine in life. But when I went through all that, when I went through that rite of passage, I became a better person on the end of it than I ever could have been without going through that.
Your recovery, I mean, you've come a long way, obviously, Congressman. What about those that are experiencing PTSD right now? And I believe the suicide rate again, for veterans is about 20 a day now,
It's
something like that.
Yeah.
How can we solve this or deal with this right now to make it better for our veterans?
It's staggering. So number one, you talk about post-traumatic stress, and it's one of the most difficult things to assess. When people look at me, they know how to help me. They can look at me and say, oh, you might need a hand down the stairs, or you know, you might need a cane or something to assist with your. They can look at me and they know exactly what the issue is, and they know how to react. When you're talking about an issue of post-traumatic stress, you can't look at somebody and say, oh, this is how I help the situation. It doesn't work that way. It's not so visible, and it's a much more difficult injury, I think, to go out there and deal with. I think one of the things that you do above all is love, right? We love our brothers. You know, we have a certainly brotherly love that exists between us, you know, as brothers and sisters in arms that needs to never end, that we need to constantly be there for one another. One of my brothers calls me, you know, I pick up the phone. You know, if I see I missed a call from them, I'm on it immediately. You know, is everything all right? Is there anything that we can do? One of the things that I think is important is that we talk about these things. You know, we try to take the stigma out of what can exist out there, about the stigma out of asking for help, or out of saying that, you know, listen, I've thought about stepping in front of a bus, or I've thought about going to sleep in my garage and you know, with the car on and never waking up again. You know, we got to take the stigma out of these things and talk to, you know, one another about them and be there for one another.
Yeah, I've done some research myself on PTSD and suicide rate amongst our veterans, and I guess in the research I found out most of them would like to speak to a fellow soldier rather than a civilian. Is that true?
I can't say that that's the case for every single person that faces that.
Right.
But I think it's the case for a lot of them. We as service members, whether we served in World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Mogadishu, the Gulf War, Panama, Grenada, you know, Iraq, Afghanistan, we have had very unique experiences that people that haven't had those experiences, they can't necessarily put themselves in the same place.
Right.
And so in that, yeah, I think it's important that we have that ability to speak to one another because we have a common ground. And we're immediately able to open up with one another because of that brotherhood. I say that, you know, brother, sisterhood. I say it, you know, in an interchangeable way. But I often joke with people, when I go to the VA, and this is completely true, when I go to the VA and I meet somebody, it doesn't matter if he was from World War II, and I was in the Army and maybe he was in the Marines or the Air Force or the Navy, the first thing we do is we jab at one another. You know, joking, oh, you were in the Marines, and, you know, see, I'll say something about him and he'll say something about me being in the Army.
Sure.
We don't know each other from Adam. But the first thing that we can do is go there and dig at one another, because there is a brotherhood that exists.
Exactly.
That overcomes all of those many years of time, that overcomes whatever else we did in life, overcomes our political parties, overcomes genders, overcomes everything. We served. We served a cause that we believed to be bigger and greater than ourselves as individuals. Our sense of duty was to the United States of America above everything else. We have that common ground, and because of that, we can start off by butting heads in a joking way, in a jovial way that leads to camaraderie.
Well, I'm a Navy vet, and I could attest to that.
Yeah.
You know, Marines and sailors always busting each other.
Always.
It's a constant thing. So.
Always.
But it was a great time.
But we smile about it. It's
Yes,
one
we
of,
did.
It's one
Yes,
of the
we
things
did.
that,
Yes, we
that we
did.
love.
Well, is there anything else you'd like to add, or
You know, when you think about our veterans, that's the biggest thing that I could say is just, love,
Sure.
love on them. Recognize that they had very unique experiences, and that, when I get the opportunity to go out there, because I get a lot of opportunity to speak to kids in high school and stuff like that these days, I give them a very important piece of my military experience. I tell them, I can't tell you what job to choose in life, or if you wanted to go into the military, I can't tell you what branch to serve in. I can't tell you what college to go to. I can't tell you how to become a millionaire. I can't tell you what the best decisions are to make. What I learned from the military is that if you serve something that is bigger, that is more important than yourself as an individual, it doesn't matter what it costs you. You're not going to have any regrets. I don't regret 1 second of my time in service. I don't regret the moment that I was injured. I would go back and do it all again, even if I knew I was going to be injured or injured worse. I would go back and do it, and that's what serving something bigger than yourself is about. There's not one day where I would trade 2 legs and a finger for any one of my friends. That was my job, to place myself between my brothers and those possible hazards of improvised explosive device. I was injured doing my job, and I have 0 regrets in that. I was in the place that I was supposed to be at the time that I was supposed to be. And that's the message that I give them. Serve something. Doesn't have to be the military. There's 100 things out there to serve that are bigger than ourselves as individuals. But if you serve something bigger than yourself, you won't regret any sacrifice.
Well, thank you for your service and your sacrifice, Congressman.
Thank you, sir.
It's a pleasure having you here on set.
Thank you for your service. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I want to thank everyone out there for tuning in to Heroes Among Us. Remember, if you see a veteran out on the street, please thank him or her. And we'll see you next time on Heroes Among Us.